We're going to move on to an interesting session called Oneself as Another. Poetry, like I mentioned, it actually has its own language. However, for each one of us to truly enjoy the words, it's important for us to listen to it in our native language, a language that comes naturally to us. And it's amazing how the world of translation has developed, and translators themselves are bringing out nuances of poetry, not just verbal translation, and they're being storytellers themselves. I would like to please welcome on stage Jerry Pinto, Mani Rao, and Ranjit Hoskote, along with Malachi, Edwin, Vethamani, for the session Oneself as Another. Let's welcome them with a round of applause.
You guys are the real survivors of a long day, and we have an exciting panel with us on translation. What I have proposed with the panelists is that I'll invite them to read their work. We have about 7 minutes of each of that. And after that, we'll get them to talk to us about the connect that they have with the writing they do, the translation, and the poets that they work with. So with that, can I invite Ranjit to, are you all right? Would you, okay, yes. Or do you prefer to sit?
Working, okay. Malachi, thank you so much for your framing remarks, and it's really a pleasure to be on this panel because translation, I think for many of us as poets, is really a part of our practice. It's not necessarily something we do other than our poetry. It feeds into and it nourishes our own practice. And I'm going to read from my translation of the 14th century Kashmiri mystic and poet Lal Ded, who is, who, as many of you know, revered both by Muslims and by Hindus in Kashmir. She's known as Lal Arifa in one context, as Laleshwari in another. And as we go along, I hope to be able to talk about how this corpus has evolved over time. So if at its core there is a historical personage, an actual woman called Lala, there is also all the work that has been done by anonymous contributors who have written under her, who have sung under her signature in her name for centuries. So what we receive today is actually the work of many, many hands, women and men, scribes and peasants, Hindus and Muslims. This is the kind of work that actually makes nonsense of these polarized definitions with which we divide ourselves. So I'm going to read a few of the varks, if I may. And the vark is a 4-line composition, an utterance, which, as I've argued in my introduction, also is not as strange as it seems. It really is part of a far larger circulation of poetic forms to which we sometimes assign the name of the Doha. So I'll begin with one which the sense of it has meant a great deal to me. What the books taught me, I've practiced. What they didn't teach me, I've taught myself. I've gone into the forest and wrestled with the lion. I didn't get this far by teaching one thing and doing another. Thank you. One shrine to the next, the hermit can't stop for breath. Soul, get this, you should have looked in the mirror. Going on a pilgrimage is like falling in love with the greenness of faraway grass. I'm also reading, there are 5 varks that I'm going to read of nearly 150 that I have here. It's also to draw attention to the different kinds of tonality and register, because as I said, it is a contributory lineage from which these emerge. So there's very different, there are things that are far more part of theological vocabulary. There's also folk wisdom, there are riddles. There's a great many different kinds of registers that we find in the varks of Lala. Now, sir, Make sure you've corralled your ass, or he'll champ his way through your neighbor's saffron gardens. No one's going to stand proxy when it's your neck on the block. This has particular resonance for us today, I think, because Lalla warns against being taken in by all kinds of demagogues. To dam a flood, to blow out a forest fire, to walk on air, to milk a wooden cow, any con artist could do it. And this is the one I'll end with. Don't think I did all this to get famous. I never cared for the good things of life. I always ate sensibly. I knew hunger well, and sorrow, and God. Thank you.
Now at the podium.
So I'm going to read a few stanzas from the second chapter of the Gita, in translation that is. It starts from 2.11 when Krishna begins to speak. By that time, and I'm assuming that you all know how the development goes, Arjuna has thrown down his bow and arrow and he says he's not going to fight because he can't kill his relatives. 2.11 Krishna. Nice speech, Arjuna, but the truly wise know better than to be sad over life that's gone or not. Life and death pass. I was never not and never won't be. You too, and them. You change in this body from child to adult and decrepit, and you change into another body again. Sensations, cold, heat, pleasure, pain, are mortal. They come and go. Stay unruffled. By them, get ready for immortality. If it isn't, it isn't. If it isn't true, it isn't real. What you call reality is really virtual reality. Your reality is materiality. Material, changeable, mortal, untrue, immaterial. It seems as if, but there's no truth in fiction. What is clear to a seer. That by which this immaterial matter is permeated is permanent. Bodies end. The embodied, timeless. Let's call it it. Cannot be measured, destroyed. So fight, Arjuna. She who thinks it kills and she who thinks it's killed, don't get it, is neither. It is who you really are. Never was it born, never will it die, nor ever having been will ever not be. Forever from ever, unchanging in the changing body. If you know you are indestructible, eternal, birthless, changeless, for instance, how can you believe you're the one to kill, and who do you kill? War, warrior's duty, your duty, fear not. So that was a short excerpt from the Gita. And in case you're wondering, it is a poem, and that's why it's here in this session. You know, every sloka is a poem, whether it's Nasato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate sataha. Once you experience it in Sanskrit, you immediately know you're reading poetry. Very short excerpt next from my translation of Kalidasa. This is from Canto 1 of Raghuvamsham. And some of you may know this very well-known verse, Vagatha viva sampraktau vagatha pratipattaye jagata pitaro vande parvati parameshwaro. So it begins with that. To make words meaningful, I invoke Shiva Parvati, makers of the world, like word and meaning wed. My theme, the solar dynasty. My talent, not more than dim folly, wanting to cross an ocean on a raft. Seeking fame reserved for poets, I'm a dunce, I'm going to be mocked. Like a dwarf, arms greed stretched for fruit only the tall can reach. Or perhaps I'll enter through the door of speech opened by previous poets, easy like a thread through a gem already pierced by a diamond. That's me. Although deficient in speech, when their virtues come to my ears, I'm compelled, I will dare describe the Raghu dynasty. All the way from birth, pure. So this stanza is, also sound-wise. Samudrakshiti shanam. Soham is, that's me. I am he. Soham. Janma shuddhanam. Phalodaya karmanam. Samudrakshiti shanam. Anakaratha vatmanam. All the way from birth pure, all the way to celestial regions, their chariots, all the way to the edges of oceans, their kingdoms, all the way until results are evident, their duties. Their rituals follow rules, punishments suit crimes, gifts meet desires, their attentions on time. For charity's sake, wealth. For truth's sake, brevity. For fame's sake, victory. Only for propagation, marriage. In boyhood they study, in youth they relish the world, in old age they are ascetics, and at the end they forsake their bodies, yogic. People who know the difference between wrong and right, listen to this story. It's in fire that gold's tested, pure or alloyed. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to tell you a story to begin with. The story involves my gym in Mahim. It's a very odd place for translations of bhakti poetry to start, but Mahim is that kind of place. So I was on the treadmill at Forever Fit, and the usual music that gyms play was playing, which is din chaka din chaka din chaka din chaka din chaka. When suddenly the music system failed, okay, completely failed, and there was blessed silence. And I was walking on the treadmill, and 2 treadmills away I could see was Neela Bhagwat of the Gwalior Gharana, who began to sing. Mungi udali akashi, tine gilile suryanshi. And the wonderful thing about a classical Indian performer singing a line like that is they come back again and again to it. And Mungi udali suryanshi. So suddenly I'm thinking, an ant flew into the sky. She's singing, Tine girile suryanshi. I'm thinking, this ant swallowed the sun. What does that mean, to swallow the sun? Is it a little girl, Muktabai, sitting in Alandi somewhere, picking up an ant and holding it with one eye closed and watching it completely cover the sun? Or is it that meltdown of God, when God appears in your life and you swallow God and He's gold and lava inside you and dissolving you, and you are now part of gold, gold everywhere, spreading, spreading. And the third line comes. The third line has Muktabai letting me down tremendously. That's not the only miracle that happens, she says. The barren woman gives birth to the son. And you're thinking, oh Muktabai, why son? Why can't you just say child? But she's Muktabai. She's talking from her time. In all our traditions across the world, whether it is Sarah giving birth to a child in her old age, the barren woman who gives birth performs a miracle by giving birth to a son. So I forgive Muktabai. And I turn to Neela Bhagwat, who is standing next to me, and I say, I want to read this. And I want to read it lazily. I want to read it in translation. And she says, there's no translation. And I'm so stupid at that point. I'm so love-struck by gold and ants and barren women and suns and scorpions burrowing into the underworld. I'm so in love with all this, I say, let's translate them. And immediately I'm thinking, Jerry Pinto, this is 21st century India. You're a Roman Catholic boy offering to translate bhakti poetry from the 13th century. Are you completely out of your gourd? Have you just swallowed the sun yourself? But Neela Bhagwat is a communist. She's a singer. She's a natural tearaway. She doesn't see me as a Roman Catholic. She sees me as a goof. And we'll goof together, she says. So I say, you choose 150, 2,000, whatever poems that you think are the best of these women poets, and we'll translate them together. And I think, yeah, this will not happen. I'll be safe. I mean, because she won't do it, and it'll just get over like that. Because I've offered this again and again to people. I've said, choose your Urdu poems. Let's work on them together. Let's do this. And they say, yeah. And they go home and they forget about it all. And it's over. 8 days later, knock on the door. Neela Bhagwat has 80 poems ready. And she's challenging me. And what begins is magic. Because suddenly, all the little Nawab who's hidden in every man, who wants a personal audience with a singer. I'm sitting in Neela's house. She's singing an abhang to me. A great classical voice is expounding the abhang to me, and I'm listening. Because I have to try. It's just such glorious fun. So all that happened after that was simply bhakti breaking over me. Breaking again and again over me and taking me down roads that I have absolutely loved. I think 8 minutes is over, so I'll read that. Probably I'll read one poem to you, and then at some points I'll read other ones. This I loved because in some senses I feel that there is a terrible silence around menstruation in India. And here is a woman, Soyarabai, who looks men in the face and asks a question. You say some bodies are untouchable. Tell me what you say of the soul. You say defilement is born in the body. If menstrual blood makes me impure, tell me, who was not born of that blood? This blood of mine fertilizes the world. Tell me, who has not sprung from this source? Soira says, this impurity is the cornerstone of your world. That's why I praise only Panduranga, who lives in everybody, pure, impure. Thank you.
So now we'll go around the panelists, and maybe you could tell us what is it that drew you to the works that you are translating. And also, the thing is, you are translating works. In the case of the Bhagavad Gita, it has been translated in various languages and in English a few times. What were some of the challenges you felt, and how your own ideological stand, because we all come with our various worldviews, and how does your ideology challenge you so that it's not you who eventually emerge, but it's still the original, authentic voice that you want to bring out? Yeah? Maybe we can start with Ranjit. Yeah?
I spent really 20 years of my life working on Lala. And in the process, I think many of us as translators know this, you are broken and remade by what you're translating. You're not the same person who began that project. I mean, the text challenges you, it questions your assumptions. So when I began, I was 21. And I came to it primarily out of a deep sense of, I have to say, ancestral feeling. Because to me, Kashmir is the original homeland of my ancestors. So there was a great, if you will, nostalgia. There was a desire for this lost culture, this lost language. And it was in that spirit that I embarked on the translation of Lala. And I loved the poems, which at that point I'd read in English translation and in Hindi paraphrases. And part of the 20 years was also actually learning the language, getting a sense of it. But ideologically, as many of us are or were in our early 20s, I was on the left. So I was also going through this moment of profound questioning of religious certitudes, orthodoxies. So in a sense, Lala's voice made great sense even there, because she was, in her own time horizon, a dissident. She was someone who worked with religious materials, had a profound, powerful sense of quest, but who did not conform easily to any ready-made theologies. And in the course of these 20 years, it really was, I found my own views on this changing, on religion, and I've written about this, so I'm just going to summarize this, and I hope we'll talk about this more. It's 20 years in which the country moved towards a very, very aggressive religious resurgence. It's really political religiosity. So I found myself struggling more and more with questions of how does one articulate a spirituality, a religious position, a concern with text, a concern with what is received as scripture. So these were the questions that I continue, that haunted that work. So this is it. And as I delved deeper and deeper into the texts, as I said when I read the Varks, what came across was the plurality of voices within. So there was also a way in which translation was archaeology, translation was discovery. It was a discovery of the different kinds of anonymous voices hidden in that text.
Thank you. Mani?
Thank you. I think I'll just share the process of how I got around to translating the Gita, maybe just as one example. It was not a very conscious decision, actually. It was accidental. What happened was I read the Gita in Sanskrit for the first time in its entirety and was totally shocked that it was delightful. I hadn't known that. I had always read it in translation. And when I was in school, we had memorized just a few shlokas, the standard ones. I knew the basic concept, soul's immortal, you can't burn it, you can't cut it, so I thought I knew it. That's Gita. Put it aside, And I've got a few translations because everybody dips into them, but I had always thought them dull, and I had probably never read them properly. So when I read it in Sanskrit for the first time, and I realized what a fabulous experience that was, that immediately became sort of the motivation to get to know it. Simultaneously, and this is the bizarre way things come together, I was actually in a translation theory class at the time, being taught by Dr. Giuseppe Natali, who translated Moby Dick and so on, and we were talking about translation theory. As part of a class exercise, we had to translate 5 verses. I had my sight on Gita Govinda. I don't think Dr. Natali actually knew anything about it. He said, why don't you try the Gita? And I thought, that's so boring. Why would I do that? But I had to do something, and I started working on it. At the minute I touched it, I was in for the whole thing. I was working on it. I researched it for 4 or 5 months. I looked at every translation I could lay my hands on to understand really strongly what it was that I felt in my gut was not happening for me in them. I put it aside and then went into the text, and I was working on it for over a year. In a sense, that whole isolation was good. I didn't have to think about anything ideological or anything about the context, about the publishing, nothing. I was having fun with it. I did the entire thing and thought of publishing maybe months afterwards.
Maybe I'll just ask you a question before we go on to Jerry. You said that you read other translations in English and you put them aside. What was it that made you think that your translation was going to make a difference to what was already existing?
See, there are certain traditions of explaining the Gita. We have a whole Bhashyakara tradition, a commentarial tradition, where there is the word meanings and then there is the commentary, right? And that's how people receive the Gita. But what happens in the translation genre is you try to translate everything that is said in that space. So you do one word with a word and a line with a line. There were two kinds of translations I found. One prose, of course, and one poetry. Those which were poetic were either trying to be poetic or cutting up a prose line into 4 fragments so it looked like a poem. There was not really that rhythmic sense. What I came up with was a certain set of what you call expectancy norms. Like, what is it that I would expect from the Gita? It's a speech, you know. He's not stopping in the middle of the talk and saying, now it's chapter 2, Dvitiyo Adhyaya. He's not saying that. It's on the battlefield, you know. So I imagined a few things. I put myself in Arjuna's shoes. This is spoken word, right? It's simple. It's not classical Sanskrit. It's very simple Sanskrit. It should be simply translated. Second thing, the cognitive units are all different. You cannot do one word with one word and one line with one line, because sometimes you need few sentences to translate it. Sometimes 4 or 5 things are repetitive, you want to just sum it up, right? The other thing, the syntax. In Sanskrit, you can actually be more fluid with the words, because you read it and you draw the connections between different words as you read it in Sanskrit. I did the same thing in English by using columns and using the space of the page, so you can read it vertically and horizontally sometimes. So I created relations and a spatial sort of, like a kinetic movement. So I use different techniques to replicate my experience of the Sanskrit Gita.
Okay, thank you. Sure, yes. Sorry.
No, I thought I could just, in the same context, because it's, in my case, with the Lalla, for instance, also there have been translations, a number of them over the years. And the reason I had felt a certain unease with them is precisely that they fell into one or another of these forms of translating idioms. There's a terrible poeticality which has haunted the translation of scriptures, religious texts, mystical literature from India particularly. It's made to sound suitably abstract and profound. And that actually destroys the textures of what is going forward. And particularly with the Lalla corpus, for instance. These are different voices which have made different voices that have chosen different vocabularies that work in different registers. So it's on a range from highly scribal Sanskrit to far more rough, and there's a tradition of Sanskrit commentary. So it's reading past these screens and recovering really things like the verbs, the doing words in the language, the roughness, the texture of the Kashmiri, to pull that back and use those energies in the English versions. And to have not a kind of even, all-over kind of sense to the translation, but to preserve the surprise of each new utterance. It's also a way of bearing witness to and being true to the oral tradition. Because it's only really in the time of print modernity, honestly, 1920, that this corpus comes together and is available to a large number of people. Before that, it's confined to, not confined, it's circulating in reading circles, in lines of transmission, in exchanges, in manuscript. So how does one put together an edition today which bears witness to this kind of kaleidoscopic reality?
Thanks. Jerry, maybe you'd like to add?
You know, like Ranjit and all of us, we grew up in the 1970s and we read D.D. Kosambi and we read all these historians, Marxist historians, and it was very clear Bhakti had a direct relationship with feudalism. It fed into feudalism. So to begin with, there was that baggage that had to be conquered. And I think for me, the discovery or the shift was when I began actually to encounter the voices of these women. And specifically, I think it's important that they were women, because in some senses, Neela Bhagwat often says that, you know, women are the Adi Dalits, that they're always the outcasts. They're always the people who suffer injustice, do not have land, do not have money, do not have access to power. So even someone like Muktabai or Bahinabai, who were Brahmin born, would also have experienced outsider status. Muktabai also, because at one point her caste status is taken from her, because she's held to be the daughter of a returned sadhu. So then you begin to look at what is this poem doing when I encounter it, and how does it fit into me? And for me, whatever relationship one has to the larger, is a relation of scrabbling. I don't even use the word seeking. Seeker seems to me sometimes like something a little more profound than I am. I seem to be slipping off the edges, always slipping off the edges of something that I want desperately to mean in a very important inside way. I want it desperately, but I'm falling off the edges. And the poems that we chose from these women were where there was slippage, where there was that sense that why is this not working? Why does this seem so easy, so obvious? You know, very often a woman saint will talk to Tsokha Mela and say, how do you get it? How do you get him to be where you want him to be? How come I'm not there? Janabai will say, why is it that I'm left out? Everyone's sitting inside with you. Why am I sitting outside? This sense of that exclusion, this sense of that poignant searching, okay, that was what drew me to these women. That feeling that all of us have that moment when, you feel that there is it's terrible to say in public, I'm feeling a bit exposed even now saying it, but you feel that for a second sometimes you have a direct line to something bigger than you. And it evaporates. It just breaks off. And what happens after that is the long dark night of the soul. To me, these are the moments, these are the places where those women sang across centuries to me. And I tried my best to bring what I heard of their voice. I mean, improbably difficult. The same Muktabai poem has a line where she says, the scorpion burrows into the underworld. Now, that's my line in English. Now, scorpion, you're looking at scorpion and you know that in Sanskrit aesthetics, and remember she's sister to Jnaneshwar, so she's probably sat in scholarly discussions all her life. She knows that the scorpion is an aesthetic symbol for lust, right? If you go to Khajuraho and you see a sculpture of a woman with a scorpion on her thigh, you know that this is a woman who is in the grips of lust, right? Now, how do I bring this scorpion? Bichhu lad gaya in Hindi songs. The scorpion stung me and I'm aflame with desire. It's the same root. How do I bring this scorpion across to the English Anglophone world? Why is it burrowing into the underworld would be of any significance when scorpions burrow into the underworld? Yeah? So you constantly there is loss. Constantly you're apologizing to Muktabai who's standing by your shoulder and you're losing her. But so much actually can be gained even in the personal sense, even in the realm of what your practice is or how it deepens something inside you that you'll do it anyway. You'll fail. You'll say, okay, I'll fail. But you'll fail because something bigger will happen in that failure, in that moment of failure. And that may be bhakti. That failure also has value somewhere. Somewhere has value.
Thank you. That's very insightful, what all of you shared with us. One thing you have in common is that all three of you have chosen to translate in English. The translation, and what I'd like to know is, what is your sense of readership that you had in mind, or does it not matter and why the choice of English as your medium for translating these poems?
Yeah. Actually, I'm really sorry. I wish there was a choice involved. Yeah.
Poets don't have choice.
I can't do anything else. I see my other languages, Hindi, Urdu, Marathi, Gujarati, Konkani, which I read, I see them as places of pilgrimage. That's where I go. I go respectfully and I read respectfully, and but I know I'm a visitor. English is my language of dream. English is my language of experience. So when I come back from my pilgrimage, this is what I bring: the little mementos and keepsakes of that wonderful space that's outside me.
I'm in a similar position. English is the language I know and write and think, and it's my first language in that sense as a writer. I translated from Sanskrit because that's the other language that I can read and understand and all that. I feel I can do Telugu as well, but I'm still not yet as literate in it as I should be. It's my mother tongue. I speak it well, but it's the reading literacy that's not fluent enough yet, I feel.
Ranjit?
I read Hindi also, but I don't
Okay.
think I'm good enough to
Right.
translate it.
Likewise, I mean, I'm an Anglophone poet, and all three of us are. English is our first language. But we're all also, to one degree or another, part of the polyglossia of growing up in India and being part of an Indian situation. Having said that, I should also say, as Sheldon Pollock argues, the concept of a mother tongue emerges from a romantic understanding of identity and folk memory in the nation state. And there is no word for mother tongue in any Indian language before the 18th century or around there. Matra Bhasha, like many other words, is an invention that comes very, very late.
Mother tongue has become a very problematic label. I think it's best to go by what is your primary language of expression. Yeah.
And as far as readership goes, if you're a poet, you begin by assuming there is no readership. The good thing about this is not that it's cynical. The good thing about it is that it is real. You feel no one will read this poem. And then every time someone reads it, it's like a gift. It's just like, you read my poems? How great is that? I mean, it's just so wonderful that you can actually live in a state of happy. And so then, but the translations, I don't have a problem worrying about readership. Really, actually, I'm absolutely positive that Muktabai, Soirabai, Janabai, Kanhopatra, Vatsara, these women are magnificent poets. And they will find their readers. They will find fabulous readers, much more readers than Jerry Pinto will ever find for his poetry. So for them, I'm not worried. They will, if there is a failure, it will be my failure in translating them adequately. But I hope even that. See, this is the lovely thing about translation. A bad translation can make someone angry enough to want to do a good translation. You don't like my translation?
Yes.
Hey, come on, challenge. Go on, take it away. Do the next one. Move it to the next level. And all of us benefit. All of us benefit.
I completely agree with what he's saying. I mean, I think as a translator, you absolutely know there's a certain life to a translation, and it'll get translated again and again. As far as something as the Gita goes, no translation is ever going to erase it.
Yes.
You will have lots more. It will just multiply, and it'll just be like a palimpsest, which keeps on becoming more and more rich.
Yeah. Thank you. Ranjit, did you want to add something just now?
I did. Just to say that honestly, it's been a blessing, and I think this is probably, even as a poet, I think it's, for me, the best thing that I think I could have done was to offer this translation of Lala. But the disquiet I have, and I mean, to me that's like a cornerstone of my practice. But the disquiet I have is this, that there's been an enormous response to the translation, to Lala herself, to people who've discovered her. I wish that many of these readers, and I'm humbled by this, and I respect the fact that people are reading her, I wish they would turn some of that empathetic energy to Kashmir as a situation, as a place of crisis, and to have that empathy move from texts and figures and narratives also to what is actually going on there. Because the tragedy today is that, and I suffer this every single day, looking at the mass media, reading the newspapers, it's a complete ignorance of Kashmiri culture, Kashmiri literature, and the specific history of the place and its people. So I'm in the strange situation of being, in some sense, a custodian of a text, but also feeling a certain kind of responsibility for the country and the people to whom that text belongs.
Thank you. Can I invite the three of you to do another round of reading, a short text each, and then we'll have some questions. Yeah, but before the questions, could you maybe read something short? Yeah. Mani, you want to start?
Okay, so what I'm going to read is actually the Gurvashtakam. It's a translation of the Gurvashtakam. It's 8 stanzas. Now, it's usually recited with a lot of piety. It is a pious and sincere poem, but it's funny as well. If you really think about it, it's funny. And I want you to listen to that. I'll just do one stanza in Sanskrit. Shariram surupam tathava kalatram yashascharu chitram dhanam merutulyam gurorangri padme manaschenna lagnam tatakim 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 tatakim. My body is shapely, so is my missus, and my fame pretty as a pick. I've got cash, Mount Meru heaps, but if mine's not at Guru's feet, it's futile, 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 futile. Wife and wealth, kids and grandkids, I have a house and relatives. But if mine's not at home at Guru's feet, all futile, 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 futile. Veda and Vedanga, I know inside out. Out come the Shastras when I open my mouth. I do poetry, I'm a pro in prosody. If mine's not studious at Guru's feet, it's futile, 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 futile. Internationally respected, nationally celebrated, in proper behavior, there's no one but moi. If mine's not true at Guru's feet, futile, 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 futile. On the world stage, king, emperor, mobs keep kissing my feet. If mine's not simple at Guru's feet, futile, 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 futile. Thanks to my charity, my fame's gone far. Thanks to my blessedness, all worldly things are near. If mine's not anchored at Guru's feet, futile, 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 futile. I have no thought for pleasures, treasures, love treats, yogic feats. But if mine's unfocused at Guru's feet, futile, 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 futile. Both home and wilderness, I'm disinterested in job, life, and precious things. But if mine's insincere at Guru's feet, futile, 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 futile. Student or householder, ascetic or king, whoever studies the Guru hymn gets an A+. If mine's insincere at Guru's feet, futile, 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 futile.
Thank you. Jerry, would you like to do? Yeah. Lovely.
Here I'm going to, these are two women who are seriously angry. Okay? And I'd like you to remember that when you're thinking about this angry woman, the first angry woman, she's the mother of one of the saints. The saint is Namdev. Now this Namdev has also brought into his house another saint who was abandoned in a temple, Janabai. Rajai, who is his mother, is singing this, and she's in such a bad mood that she's abandoned the house god, and she's gone back to a mother goddess figure who is, a village goddess. Because she's just not talking to that Panduranga who's caused all the problems in her house. She's going to talk to Mesai. Okay? The man of the house says he's found a guru. Mother Mesai, now what do? I have a family, hungry mouths to feed. Namdev, my lord, pays them no heed. Mesai, I'm asking you for aid. I can't see anyone else who will help My husband has Vitthala on his mind and fills the house with others of his kind. They dance, they sing, they touch each other's feet. They chant Vitthala's name and joy breaks free. And here I think there is a moment when she's actually feeling, I want part of that joy. I want to be there, but I've got to feed this lout. Poor Gonai, you birthed a white stone. Even that Vitthala claimed for his own. Mesai, how would a woman not be vexed? Mother, you tell me, what comes next? And thank you. Thank you on behalf of Rajai. Okay, I think that's...
Okay, thank you. Ranjit.
I'm going to start with, I'm going to just read a few of the marks. The idea of an original and an interpolation makes no sense to me at all. Because we've seen over the years, and with particular acceleration now, there's a constant battle over what is authentic in a text that is inherited and what was added later. This only makes sense when you're scrabbling over and battling over something that's in print. In the oral tradition, you've had various different versions which have lived amicably, and you just pass from one to the other. And that's happened to Lalla as well. Especially in the last 25 years, there are on both sides of this question. There's one attempt to demonstrate that she is completely part of a Sufi tradition. On the other hand, there's a claim that she's entirely Shaivite. And you just look at the material, you look at the figure, and you say, why can you not be enchanted by the possibility that this makes nonsense of your distinctions? You know? So I'm going to read a late Vak. We know this wasn't composed in the 14th century, but it has great resonance. Shiva lives in many places. He doesn't know Hindu from Muslim. The self that lives in you and others, that's Shiva. Get the measure of Shiva. Then there's another genealogy that comes into the Lalla corpus, which comes from that wandering ascetics, the Siddhas, the Nathas, the Pashupatas. So there's some part of the wisdom literature aspect of Lalla where it resonates with, for instance, something that you just read. Hermit or householder, same difference. If you've dissolved your desires in the river of time, you will see that the Lord is everywhere and is perfect. As you know, so shall you be.
Thank you. I'm afraid we'll have to conclude this panel session. I know I did say that we'll try to have a Q&A, but I'm afraid we are running behind time. So can we, so I'm not going to take any questions because I've seen a few hands. To be fair to all, let's give us a round of applause to our panelists, and I do apologize. Yeah.
That you can have your question and answer sessions outside with the panelists, so they're not going away. They can't just get away that easy. You know, when it comes to art, it's extremely important not to hide the madness. And a translator's job, I think, when they're translating the kind of madness that poets create, it's a really tough one. And it's lovely the way good translators keep the essence of the words intact. Let's give the translators another round of applause, please.